Hey guys, it's Jake here with etrailer. Today we're going to be taking a look at and I'm going to show you how to install the Demco Air Force One supplemental braking system on our 2017 GMC Sierra 1500. Now the biggest reason for adding a supplemental braking system, especially like the Air Force One, to your GMC Sierra is going to be so that your vehicle can stop itself while you're flat towing it behind your motorhome. There's a lot of states that will require you to have a supplemental braking system, and it all is typically based off of weight. So you want to check in the states that you're going to be traveling through to make sure what your requirements are. But 9 times out of 10, you're going to have something. With the Air Force One, it is going to be paired with motorhomes with air brakes. So if your motorhome has air brakes, this is going to be one of those top tier kits. But essentially what it does is it'll transfer an air signal or an air pressure from the motorhome back to the braking system, applying the brakes in the truck proportionally when you're stopping the motorhome. Now in order to test out your system properly, you will want to start your motorhome and push the brakes a couple of different times, and that's going to charge the system and allow you to take off safely. You'll notice that we'll have a red LED on the back of our mirror. That is going to be our indicator light that allows us to see when the brakes are physically being depressed inside of our vehicle. And the way that you use that is that when you're driving down the road, it's a lot easier to use at night, but you'll look in the rear view camera of your motorhome and see that red light being lit up. That's going to tell you that the system's working properly inside of your towed vehicle. If you do not have a rear view camera, or you don't really like the camera system that you have, I would highly recommend going with the Air Force One with the Coach Link, because that is going to be a Bluetooth model that you'll install a control module in here. Same thing, it'll detect the brakes being depressed. Instead, you'll have a monitor that goes up on your dash that'll tell you whether or not the brakes are being depressed. Now, one of the last components I want to go over in this kit before we jump into the installation is going to be our breakaway switch. This is an absolute must, and it does come with the kit. This plunger is designed in an unlikely disconnect. If your vehicle ever comes disconnected from your motorhome, this plunger is going to be pulled, and that is going to apply the brakes on the inside of your towed vehicle, bringing your vehicle to a safe and slow stop. Well guys, now that we've gone over some of those features, let's go ahead and jump into the installation. To begin our installation, you're going to need to locate some areas that you're going to mount your components in. First and foremost is going to be the main operating unit. It needs to be mounted up under the hood, typically somewhere. Then we need to mount our breakaway switch, our air chuck on the front, and our brake cylinder is going to mount on the inside. So let's go ahead and go through where I decided to mount each one of those components. The main operating unit we mounted right here on the inside of our engine bay. This is typically where a spare battery would go. We just took advantage of this open space on the side and used some self-tapping screws to tap it right into the sheet metal. Now our breakaway switch and our air chuck fitting, we mounted our breakaway switch right here on the bottom of our bumper and our air chuck fitting on the bottom of the bumper. We just used the included hardware, drilled a few holes through the metal plate down here to get both of these secured. And that last component is going to be our brake cylinder that is going to mount to the brake pedal. Now when you're mounting up the brake cylinder onto your brake pedal, you will want to make sure that you have a straight shot to the firewall so that when the brake cylinder has to pull on the pedal, it can do so precisely. You want to make sure that there's nothing on the other side of the firewall in the engine cavity so that you don't put a self-tapping screw through your brake booster or anything like that. If you mount it in a very similar place like we did on the firewall, you shouldn't have to worry about anything. We already checked, there's nothing back there. Now that we've got our components mounted up, we can start doing some of the nitty-gritty work, which is running some wires, getting those connected up, and connecting our hoses. We're going to start running our airline tube. We need to run one airline tube from the operating unit through a grommet on this firewall inside the footwell, and then we need another one to go out of the operating unit down to that air chuck on the front of our bumper. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and get those run through, and then we'll come back and show you the different places that I went through to get there. Now the way that we routed our airline from the bumper coming up, we ran it through this opening here. We have our grill off because we just got done putting our base plate on. If you don't have the grill off, it probably will be easier to run it down through the engine bay, but we just snaked it up along here, tucked it in and then ran it right here. This is going to be our air in. So it will go into this top inlet. You're going to have 2 air fittings on either end here. That will be your air in, and then your air out. We just ran alongside our fuse panel here, went through that grommet and into the footwell of our driver's seat. Now what we need to do is cut our hoses to length out here. I usually always leave them a little bit longer. You have more than enough airline in your kit to be able to do all this. So when you're cutting these, you want to be for sure that your ends are going to be square and not pinched. That's why we're using these airline tube cutters. You can use a razor blade too on just on a piece of metal, like if you want to cut it here. Just make sure that your cut is straight and that you don't pinch the hose at all. Now we'll loop this one around and insert it into the air in. These don't line up exactly perfect with the sticker, but you want to do the further one closer to the this inlet for our vacuum, and you just want to wait till it pops into place. Now we're going to do the same thing with our air out. Now you want to come into the footwell and do the same thing for the air line going into your brake cylinder. Now to put your vacuum line in place, you want to start at the operating unit, or I like to take about a 2-inch piece, put it into the operating unit, then take a check valve with the black end facing the operating unit, put that in place, then run another piece of vacuum line up and around, down to your factory vacuum line. You want to cut about a 3-inch chunk out of that, take your other check valve. What you can do is you can heat up this plastic. It's a little bit harder than our vacuum line that we get in our kit. Heat this plastic up, take your other check valve, shove that in there with the black end facing towards the motor and the white end facing your brake booster. Take another 2-inch piece of vacuum line into a T. The one side of the T will go back into your brake booster, and the other part of the T is where you'll put that long piece of vacuum line you just ran over from the operating unit. Now we have a few more wires we need to run. One being we need to run the brown wire that comes in your kit through that same grommet that we used earlier out into the engine bay, and we'll keep some of it down here to make a connection. We'll also need to route the LED indicator light that comes with our kit from the back of our mirror, run it up. All I did was just pop the 2 little plastic panels on the back of the mirror off, stick the light to the back of the mirror, run it along the headrest here, run it through and around this. You just want to be sure you're on the top side of the airbag that's in this pillar, not on the underside, because if it has to deploy, that wire would stop it from deploying correctly. Run that wire down along. You can see it comes out right here. Go down in through that hole, and now it's in our footwell, ready to connect. Now the connections we need to make in our footwell are going to be the wires from our brake cylinder, the wires from our LED indicator light, and then that brown wire. Essentially what you need to do is you need to attach the red wire to the blue wire, so the red wire on your indicator light to the blue wire on your brake cylinder. You need to use a heat shrink butt connector for those, attach those together, and then the violet wire that is with the blue wire on our brake cylinder, you'll have to attach that to that brown wire that goes out into the engine bay. Now the last wire we have down here is going to be the black wire from our indicator light. That is just a ground, so we just used a white jumper wire and grounded it to the firewall with the self-tapping screw. So we took our brown wire, ran it, came out of that grommet, ran it across with our factory wiring over to our battery. Now for our brown wire over by our battery, we had to splice into it. You want to just cut it in half, run a butt connector between the two, and then slide your fuse connector in with it, because this wire is going to need to run down to the orange wire on our breakaway. Now because this is going to need constant power and our vehicle here needs to have a battery disconnect installed, we'll need to connect this directly to the battery post. We can't tie it into any of these accessory posts because those will be dead when the vehicle is being flat towed. So we'll run this around, making sure that your fuse is not in the fuse holder. Run that underneath that stud there. And we'll take our socket and tighten it back up. Now from our breakaway switch, we'll bring our orange wire up. We can cut it off wherever. Just want to make sure you've got enough to be able to route it cleanly through your engine bay. Cut our brown wire. Strip both of these back and make a connection with a butt connector. Now for our black wire on our breakaway switch, you'll want to run over to the driver's side of our vehicle, run it up. We just follow the same path of our airline tube. You'll connect that to one of the black wires on our operating unit. It does not matter which one, it's just you want to connect that black wire from our breakaway switch to one of them, and then take the other one and ground it to the frame of our vehicle. Now that we've made all of those connections, what we need to do is come back, use any wire loom to tidy up any of the wires that we want to keep hidden out of the way. You want to make sure you stay away from anything hot or moving. Use as many zip ties as it takes to get everything kind of tamed, and then we can start putting the front of our vehicle back on. Now after we've got our wiring all tidied up, we can go ahead and put our fuse in place. Once you get everything all buttoned up, that's going to do it for the installation.